Thank you for joining us to view our presentation on men and caregiving. About 40% of caregivers are men, yet male caregivers are less likely to take advantage of support programs and services. This important program will share resources to best support male caregivers, best practices for working with male caregivers to help them access those resources, and tips to help male caregivers in their role. This presentation is made available through the Caregiver Teleconnection, a program of the Caregiver SOS at the WellMed Charitable Foundation. The Caregiver SOS provides support and education for family members and friends who are caring for an older loved one. We'll provide their contact information at the end of our presentation. My name is Elliot Sklar, and I'm here today with my longtime colleague and friend, Lucy Barylak. I am a professor of health science at Nova Southeastern University in Florida. After I received my doctoral degree in public health, I went on to work with seniors and caregivers in community settings, in addition to my role in teaching, which I've been doing for almost 20 years. A lot of my work is focused on men's health, including the issue of men and caregiving. I've published and presented research on caregiving internationally.
Hi, my name is Lucy Barylak, and I have a master's degree in social work from McGill University. I've been working in the public healthcare system for the past 30 years, focusing on developing services and research for caregivers' needs. I've published numerous articles and presented in major international conferences, and I was a caregiver for my mother. So today, this presentation will cover demographic of male caregivers, issues and challenges experienced by male caregivers, ways to support male caregivers, including resources. You know, caregiving is a vital role that encompasses a wide range of activities aimed at assisting individuals with daily living needs. The landscape of caregiving is evolving with an increasing number of men stepping into the caregiver role. According to the Alzheimer's Association, nearly 2/3 of individuals diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease are women. As baby boomers age, Alzheimer's and other dementia diagnoses are expected to increase as well. If this trend continues, then the number of male caregivers will continue to rise in the coming decades, and women will no longer compose the majority of caregivers, which requires a shift in how we approach men as caregivers. Right now, the majority of caregivers ads for programs and support service are they have photos that show primarily women, which could make men who are caregivers feel isolated in their role. As well, according to the data from the National Alliance for Caregiving 2020, the newest data available about caregiver demographics and issues are approximately 40% of caregivers in the United States are men. This is based upon reporting and likely under-reporting of actual proportions of men who are caregivers, especially since this data also preceded the COVID-19 pandemic. The caregiving population is diverse and includes various age groups, ethnicities, relationships, dynamics. While most caregivers are baby boomers, there's a greater age discrepancy among male caregivers who often range in age from 30 to 64, with a significant number caring for a spouse or partner. So let's look at age distribution and relationships. So primarily, men aged 30 to 64 represent a large portion of the male caregivers, reflecting a trend where middle-aged men increasingly take on caregiving responsibilities, according to the National Alliance for Caregivers in 2020. Now, relationships, about 40% of male caregivers provide care for a parent, while 26% care for a spouse. That's also according to the AARP 2020. There are also different communities of men who are caring who may have different demographics. Men within the LGBTQ community are caregivers, for example, at a higher rate than their non-LGBTQ peers.
Despite their growing numbers, and it's important what you said, Lucy, that trends are changing, and if they continue, we'll have a larger proportion of caregivers who are male. There are unique challenges among male caregivers, and there are also unique disparities. One of them is as a result of the range of ages of male caregivers, something that you discussed. Because male caregivers are more diverse in their ages, it can be hard for programs and services to target and also advertise to a diverse population. So, a caregiver who is, for example, 30 and caring for an aging parent may have very different challenges than someone who is 65 or 70 and caring for a spouse. There are also some different social expectations and stereotypes. In our society, many cultural norms surrounding masculinity can lead to stigma for men who embrace caregiving roles, or who don't embrace them, but rather who don't have a choice. So, social expectations often portray caregiving as a feminine role, which makes it difficult for men to seek help or resources when their feelings, when they want to discuss their feelings rather related to their caregiving role. So if you think about some of the advertisements for programs to support caregivers, we use a lot of images of women, as Lucy said, also the colors pink and purple, things that are attributed again more to feminine colors. So it can make men feel like they don't really have a space, and it can be harder then for men to feel comfortable in a caregiver role, let alone discussing their challenges. Now, that also, I think, it has an impact based upon our culture. If you come from a culture in which the expectation was for a caregiver to be more of, again, a female role, that can also make it more challenging or isolating. And as we know, many caregivers don't take on the role of caregiving by choice. It's often something that we have to do. Men also need emotional support, just as women do, to be able to cope with the demands of a caregiving role, to access emotional support when compared to women. And that's partly due to those social norms that discourage emotional vulnerability, and men are not socialized to talk about our feelings. So, this lack of support can also lead to increased stress and also feelings of isolation among male caregivers. One of the other issues related to here is, as Lucy described, we have a lot of male caregivers who are younger. So, if you're a 30-year-old male caregiver caring for your mom, you may feel like that's less of something common in your experience at that age. Whereas some older male caregivers may have more friends or family members in a similar situation. So if you look at online, for example, if you do your own Google search or whatever search engine you use, and do an image search for the term caregiver support programs, you don't see many images of men who are in caregiving roles. We've done this with many searches and many different search engines, and the results are consistently the same. So that lack of depiction also reinforces the stereotypes and gender norms that we're discussing. There are also some workplace challenges that are unique among male caregivers. Many men struggle to balance caregiving responsibilities with professional obligations. And in fact, more men tend to want to work longer or take on more work to help to pay for paid caregiver assistance if they can. That's also because many workplace policies lack provisions for male caregivers, which can also result in added stress. 62% of male family caregivers indicated that their caregiving experience was moderately to very stressful, coupled with financial and familial responsibilities. So, some ways to support male caregivers include simply acknowledgement. It's one of the biggest ones, is to validate the role and the experiences of all caregivers, but that includes men because men often don't either self-identify as caregivers or tend not to want to really focus too much upon their caregiver role. Male caregivers are more likely to be open to receiving support, for example, if they feel that it's of benefit to their care recipient. So, if you know a male caregiver that is reluctant to accept help or support, please keep that in mind. Remind them that it would be of benefit to the person for whom they're caring if they took some respite care, for example. It can also be important for people to be strategic and tactical in how they keeping that in mind. Because again, we're more likely to want to reject help or to not ask for it. So, awareness and education are also very important. Increasing awareness about male caregiver experiences are very important because, again, it's something we don't talk enough about in the just normal everyday discourse about caregiving. Educational programs aimed at families, employers, and healthcare providers can challenge stereotypes and promote understanding of the caregiving role. So many times in different workplaces, I see caregivers support emails and programs. And again, they look to target women or they're in pink, um, and they don't really showcase the inclusion of diversity or men. It's something we need to think more about. Now, it's also really important to establish support networks for male caregivers. Having a sense of community and shared experience are critical. We know that from practice and from research. They're very effective in helping caregivers to feel a reduced sense of caregiver burden. Support groups and peer support groups can allow men to discuss their challenges and share coping strategies, just like the caregiver teleconnection provides, and will provide their information at the end of our program. In addition, we need to think about some flexible workplace policies where possible. Male caregivers can be very reluctant to share their caregiver challenges in the workplace for fear of discrimination or that they may be passed up, for example, for promotion, all the things that we know to be true for female caregivers. So it can be important to speak with your manager or human resource manager about options for flexibility, for example, for work hours or working remote options or hybrid work options, as well as to know what family leave policies exist, because those are very important in helping to support caregivers in their role when they have to take someone to a medical appointment or need time off to help care for someone. So it's important that workplaces also recognize the contribution of male caregivers, but just as it is important for male caregivers to be open and honest in the workplace so that their workplaces can accommodate them and others.
Well, you're right. It is very important to talk about support for caregivers. Talking about the issues that make caregivers experience is important. And we need to have more conversations like this as a way of promoting awareness of support for male caregivers. So let's look at some of the organizations that are there to support. For example, Family Caregiver Alliance with the National Center on Caregiving provides resources and support for all caregivers, including a specific focus on male caregivers. AARP offers extensive resources tailored to caregivers, including articles, toolkits, and community support. Now, there are hotlines that are there for, anyone who needs it. So hotlines can be very helpful for male caregivers. They are confidential, they're free, they're accessible, and don't require any commitment. For example, 988 Mental Health Crisis Line, 211 to learn about community resources in your area. Many communities offer local counseling services, workshops, and training programs aimed at supporting caregivers. These resources can provide essential tools for managing caregiving responsibilities. And there are other other online communities. For example, online forums and social media groups can be available for male caregivers seeking connections and support. Platforms like Seven Cups, Nextdoor, which can connect you to groups in your local community, and even a Facebook has host groups where men can share experience and advice, because it's always easier to talk to someone who's going through the same things as you are. As caregiving roles continue to evolve, it is crucial to recognize and support male caregivers, assisting disparities, increasing awareness, and providing targeted resources can help create a more equitable environment for all caregivers. By fostering a supporting community, we can enhance the well-being of men who dedicate themselves to this essential and very important role.
Absolutely. And one resource that we didn't include on this slide that I thought of as you were speaking, Lucy, is also to check with your local community hospital or health facility where your care recipient may be a patient. I have seen recently more and more local groups that are targeting male caregivers, and it really does depend on the community in which you're living. In addition, I've had great success with hotlines for male caregivers, as you said, mainly because they're anonymous, they're confidential, they're free, and they don't require commitment. 988 is an invaluable crisis resource. Many male caregivers don't talk about their feelings until they reach a breaking point. And that breaking point can be a crisis, and that's exactly what 988 is for. So I really highly recommend their resource. It's free, and you can contact them from any phone using text as well, if you have a mobile phone, as well as from any landline. So we do have those resources as promised here for male caregivers. The Family Caregiver Alliance, through the National Center on Caregiving, has some dedicated resources for male caregivers specifically. And we've provided this link here for your local AARP chapter because they may have some resources for you locally on men's caregiving groups or programs in your community. And there is an organization that is a nonprofit nationally called Jack's Caregiver Coalition, which we've provided their website as well. And as we said, 211 can be great to find resources in your local community, as well as the 988 crisis hotline. And finally, for the WellMed Charitable Foundation, you can reach them by phone at 1-866 390 6491 or at caregiversos.org online. They have a lot of recorded programs on their YouTube channel, which you can find looking up the WellMed Charitable Foundation. And you can email someone any questions or concerns, and someone will get back to you at caregiversos@wellmed.net. We want to thank you again so much for joining us on this important topic of men and caregiving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.